You said we're live? You s- okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Mumbo Jumbo Community Conversations. My name is Chinyelu, and I will be one of your conversation facilitators today as we are joined by the illustrious Sheree Renee Thomas in our exploration of Echo Tree, the collected short fictions of Henry Dumas. This will be our second session diving into this book. Our first session you can find in our YouTube channel, just a little bit of an introduction to who Henry Dumas is, as well as an introduction of what the texts are that we'll be reading as we go through this book study. We'll be starting off with three today. Ark of Bones, Echo Tree, and Will the Circle Be Unbroken? But we'll get into those shortly. As always, we got to start off with our check-in. And for anybody that's watching the live stream or watching the recording that's unfamiliar with the way that we do things here at the Kepper Institute, we like to start all of our community gatherings with a check-in. And that's just a little ritual practice that we have to make sure that we're maintaining an awareness of each other, that we know what the needs are of the people in our community, and just that we're doing everything that we can to, make sure, take care of each other and make sure that everybody's taken care of. So typically what that looks like is we'll have everybody go around the room and we'll have them share their number and their color, both of which are supposed to sort of represent, how you're feeling in that moment. And then there will be a check-in question, a little icebreaker question that's supposed to help us get to know each other on a more qualitative level, So sometimes that question is something like, what's your favorite food? Sometimes that question is like something a little bit deeper, like what's a dream you had as a child? Something like that. So, I'll open it up to the floor first. Does anybody have a suggestion for a check-in question today? Maybe something Black literature themed, if we could muster that up.
What book would you take with you into the Afro future?
I like that. I like that a lot. Ooh, and I already have my answer, but I won't
Oh,
start.
wow.
I will have Sheree, why don't you start us off today?
Oh, that's easy for me. Okay, so I am an 8 antique copper today or burnished copper. And that's just from seeing Barbara Chase Rabu's Cleopatra chair at the Met Museum, their new Flight of Egypt exhibit. So if you are in New York City, definitely go check that out.
Nice.
Um, and the book that I would bring with me into the Afro future, of course, is anything by Henry Dumas. But I would bring in Echo Tree. Echo Tree. And the reason why I would bring Echo Tree is because it not only has wonderful works that ignite your dreaming self, that part of you that solves problems and looks at the what seems impossible but finds the way to do it. It's work that also draws out those old spiritual traditions that you may be taking for granted in your everyday life, or may be hidden in plain sight. He also has a political consciousness that has some really good insight and directions on things that we might need to revisit and hold on to as a community when times get tough. And I have a feeling that times are about to get tough.
What would make you think that? Wonderful. Thank you, Sheree. And
Gosh,
pass it on to
guys,
the
I
next
don't know
person.
if I froze or if y'all froze, but
No,
uh,
you're not frozen, Mrs.
You're
Fair. Can
not
you hear
frozen.
us?
We can still see
okay.
Mrs.
Well,
Fair. Yeah.
I missed what you just said.
Oh,
That's all right. I'm sure it'll come
we'll talk. We're gonna talk about it.
Yes, yes.
Oh, so the
I
question is your obviously your number and your color, but also which book would you bring with you into the Afro future? And I know it's unfair to just to pick one, but yeah.
Is
Oh
that why
man.
you picked an anthology?
Yes.
Mm, 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 mm. The first thing that comes to my mind is this little book I read that I loaned it to a young woman who was going on her way to California on a train. So because she didn't want to fly and she couldn't drive by herself, so she was on a train. So I gave her this little book, and it's about this little girl, and her name was Beto, I believe. And yeah, she comes from people in the future that were covered with a thick mud. They covered themselves always when the children would go swimming. As they got out, they would put this thick mud on them, and that was. And somehow she just didn't want to stay in her small village, I'll call it, and she was able to go to the next big city and get on a spaceship and it was just such a delightful story. It had a lot of adventure in it. Somebody else got on the spaceship, and I can't find her or my book. And I guess that's why I think about it all the time. It's because I can't put my hand on it.
Books
It
have a way
was
of
a
walking
delightful,
away from us sometimes. Yeah.
yeah, it was such a delightful story because it had all of the pieces in it. It was a normal little girl. You could identify her and where she came from because they put this mud on them. But of course, as she went into the future, as she left it to go and have an adventure and get on the spaceship and go to someplace else, and the spaceship got captured, and it found out that this mud on her helped heal the people that captured the spaceship. So you see, I just really feel remiss that I can't remember the book and I can't put my hand on it. But somebody out there knows about
Oh,
this book, and as soon as I remember about it, I'll.
this was a novel.
It was a small chapter book. It must have had maybe 100 pages in it, so it wasn't real big. It wasn't real big at all. But it was my very first. Maybe that's why I like it so much, and I think about it because it was my very first Afrofuture book.
Mm.
And since then I've read some A.K. Jemison and that young African woman that won a couple of prizes, her too. But so no, I don't have the title of the book that I would take in the future. But you can see as
Somebody in
impressed
the
as I
community is gonna let us know. They're gonna let us know.
was. I'm almost sure that little girl's name was Beto or something like that. But okay, and I'll pass it to you, Chin.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I'm feeling like an olive green 7 today. A little tired, a little wore out, but I'm feeling pretty good all in all. And I'm gonna say probably one of my favorite books, Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. Obviously it's thrilling, it's gripping, the world that she builds is interesting and engaging, but I think there are some very powerful and useful uh, spiritual and philosophical and cultural lessons to take from that text as well. Specifically when it comes to, our relationship as human beings to change in a world that is always changing, and how that understanding of change can shape even how we approach our relationships with other human beings. So yeah, I think that's just a very, very powerful book. Maybe we'll get a book study of that one in sometime next year. Although I know we've done it before, but what better time to take another look? And yeah, I'm actually gonna Mello and Khaled, would you guys join me behind the desk real quick so you guys can check in? Come check in. Come check in. Come check in. Come check in, fam. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We got two of our young Kepler community members with us in the building today. Uh, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, give your number, your color, and then give one book that you take with you into the Afro future.
Hi everybody, my name's Momolo. Um, I feel like a 7, and I feel like a black and white, and I will probably take like a Dogman book.
Okay.
Dog
Yeah.
All right.
Are you here for the CLT thing? Go to the next door down. Yeah.
Uh,
Oh,
Hi, my name's
good
Khalid.
to see you again.
Good to see you too. Hi, my name is Khalid. My number is gonna be like 5. My color is gray, and book I'd probably take is Egyptian myths.
All right. Egyptian myths. Wonderful.
And
Egyptian.
Nas, I'm not gonna pull you back from your tech setup, but give us your check-in as well, and I'll repeat it for the camera. 9.5 purple. Herbach? He said Herbach. Did you read Herbach? Uh he says Herbach because he still needs to read it. Herbach is a good one though. Yeah, Kyle, you might actually like that one. If you like Egyptian myths, you might like Herbach a little bit. It's all about ancient Egypt and living in ancient Egypt. You didn't
And
like
a
it?
young man,
Oh,
and a
well,
young man that maneuvers through all kind of situations.
well, maybe you'll give it another try. But all right, yeah, thank you everybody for checking in. Great to have everybody that we got with us today. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into it a little bit. So like as I said, we've got 3 selected stories that we're gonna dissect and discuss a little bit today. But I understand that Sheree also had some additional information about the author that she was hoping to share as well. So maybe we can turn it over to you, Sheree, first, and
But
then
yeah, we can
after
just
we,
weave
yeah.
it into the conversation.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, yeah,
great.
yeah. So for our virtual people here, Echo Tree is a collected fiction of Henry Dumas. And I always like to just to let you know I am completely biased. This is one of my favorite authors. There's some people you read their book one time, you enjoy it, but you may never visit it again, right? And that doesn't matter the genre. It could be poetry, nonfiction, what have you, a play. But there's some writers that, for whatever reason, it doesn't, maybe it's our particular life journey. Maybe it's our, epigenetic memory. I don't know what it is, but it's something about their art and their work that when you get back to it, it always feels you again, always fills you up. And so that's how I feel when I read the work of Henry Dumas, whether it's the collection Ark of Bones, which was the first time I encountered these stories, was Ark of Bones, that collection, or whether it's some of his other volumes. There is something very special about the stories that he felt compelled to tell us as a writer, as an artist. And there was something that in the different combinations of things that he put in his storytelling and in his vision that really spoke to me as a young person and speaks to me now leaning on the other side of 50. It still resonates. And I think that it's important to lift those works up that you encounter in your life and to share and be to testify. So I'm here to testify and to celebrate the amazing brilliance of Henry Dumas, and also just to say that even though he is no longer with us, his art, his craft carries on. It's the year 2024. We are all looking at a very interesting political moment in our country, right? There are people who want to pull us back to, post-Reconstruction America, and not the good part of it, not the good part of it, but the bad part of it, right? And we're not going. We're not going. Quiet as it's kept, and it won't be quiet, actually. We're not going. And this work reminds me of why why it's so important for us to continue to resist and to speak out against injustice, and also to honor the culture, the unique, amazing, brilliant culture that Black Americans and our cousins created here on these shores, right? It's so important. Mrs. Farrah, what you know good?
Well, I'm sitting here following along, and every now and then it glitches, and I don't hear any of your words.
Okay, all
I
right.
see your mouth moving though, but so I said, I don't know if it's me or if it's you. But keep going.
Okay.
But in fact, when you started talking about Henry Dumas, I said, I know that name. I know that name. And as you're speaking, I'm trying to recover where I know him from. But go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about part of the reason why I know this writer's work is because of another brilliant poet, a wonderful writer, and you may know him too, Dr. Eugene B. Redmond from East St. Louis. He is not only a poet, he was the poet laureate of East St. Louis in 1976, but he's, of course, an academic and a scholar, and an activist. And please forgive if you're hearing anything in the background. That's this city, New York, doing New York. New York is New York, and right now, where I am, it's lit. It's lit at this holiday season in New York. I'll just say that. But Dr. Redmond has made many great contributions during the Black Arts Movement, of course. And he is the founding editor of a wonderful publication called Drum Voices Review. So, you know, you think of Drum Voices Review, African American Review, The Black Scholar, Callaloo, Obsidian. These are the publications that really put down the record of Black creativity at the height of the Black Arts Movement and on to today. Brother Redmond was responsible for that. He also published a critical history of Black poetry, which was called Drum Voices, The Mission of Afro-American Poetry, a Critical History. And his own poetry volumes have been award winners, including Needs of a Natural Man, which is his selected poetry, and his book that came out in 2012. It was The Eye in the Ceiling. It won the American Book Award. And I give you all his accolades because sometimes it takes another great writer to really love and care about another writer who's no longer here to speak and create their work, to keep them a part of the conversation and to keep their work in our canon. And Eugene Redmond, and of course, Mr. Dumas, his widow, have kept that legacy alive all these many years. And I just wanted to quote something from the beautiful foreword that Dr. Redmond created. Let me see here, because there are multiple issues. This issue that volume you had is from, this volume is from Coffee House Press, very well-respected publishing company. And this is from the foreword to the 2021 edition of Henry Dumas's work. Genius speaking freedom to freedom. Ankh Dumas is 31 talking drums carved from an echo tree that echo across solar systems, percussive tales anchored by African ancientism, African futurism. All right. May 1968, scene, New York City subway. Reluctantly, Ankh Dumas elopes with death. Neither Harlem nor East St. Louis can outgrieve this riddle of bullets. Age and the age, half a century and change later, we wrestle with loss. Genius, Gwen, Tony, and Ta-Nehisi lend their talents and insights. Now Ankh asks where he comes from and is headed, answers in cosmic language. Bunk, the great god Shango and the African seed, reached down with palm oil and oozed out me. All right. So this alludes a little bit, obviously, to not only his legacy and also some of the themes that are very much, reoccurring in the work of Henry Dumas. But if you're seeing it on the page, if you're looking at it and reading along with me, then of course you can see the play on words, Ankh, A-N-K-H. Lots of wonderful new creations with the poetry, how things are written and capitalized, African ancientism, right? A new genre, right? African futurism, right? Another new genre that is being discussed and also being innovated on as we speak. So there's a lot of great things in this, and also a reference to who are some of the people who are carrying on that tradition in their own writing. And there are others I would add to the list, but that's just the beginning and opening call to this volume of stories. So you want to dive into the first one that we're looking at, Ark of Bones?
Man, I love that imagery of 31 talking drums. I think that's gorgeous. Thank you for that reading. But yeah, so looking through, I think that one starts on page 9. So yeah, we're starting off with Ark of Bones. Um and uh I can attempt to summarize it real quick. It's about two young boys. Um and that's something, I guess that's really like the first thing that like is of interest to me, I think, when I start to think about Henry Dumas, because Ark of Bones is about two young boys, Echo Tree is about two young boys, and a lot of his stories are just about like groups of young children, young boys specifically, although there are a few that do feature some young girls in there.
Mhm.
But this one is about two friends. One of them is named Head Eye, and the other one is named Fish Hound.
Sound.
Yeah, and they're two little rascals. And I think that like Ark of Bones, similar to Echo Tree, is I think about these two young fellas who sort of through their interaction with each other, their adventure together, and the games that they play with each other are sort of almost like initiating each other into these like rites of like culture and spirit, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Ark of Bones. In this one, Head Eye is sort of the one that's sort of like gifted with, the touch of spirit. He can speak to the ancestors. He takes I think it's called the soul bone or the spirit bone,
Mhm.
and he becomes like this. He gains access to this um kind of like a realm, like a spiritual realm that contains the remains. I think you could almost say like the memories of like their ancestors.
Mhm.
And he becomes somebody that can like access this new sort of like plane of existence. And he brings, Fishhound along with him as his witness, as that's an important part of the ceremony. So and at the end of it, nobody really believes Fishhound when he goes to explain sort of like what he's seen and what he's experienced, but he does. He believes and he knows. And even though his friend Head Eye has gone off to join the Ark of Bones, and I, I interpreted it as carrying on this legacy. You know, he still holds that memory with him, and he still holds that experience with him. So, um, I think that what really stood out to me about this one is like, and this is probably part of just like my reflex as a reader and as an artist, but like I tend to interpret things like very metaphorically. And so like my sort of like interpretation and processing things of this story was really through that lens of like, okay, what does the Ark of Bones here represent? What is this role here that Head Eye is like being inducted into represent. And so I think to me, and I think that this echoes throughout a lot of Henry Dumas's stories. It's really about this idea of like, tackling this question of where do we come from? Who are we? Who are we going to be in the future? And looking at the process by which those aspects of culture are like passed along, if that makes sense. And so I see this story as sort of Henry Dumas sort of exploring that process, exploring that question and looking at like basically how I think like how our young people, are I think like uniquely positioned to take on that culture, take on those memories and that history, and then carry them on into the future. So I think I'll stop there for now. Sheree, I would love to hear your sort of your read of it, but yeah, those are my initial thoughts.
Well, Toni Morrison declared him a genius, of course, and said that he had a well-deserved cult that had developed around his writing. And I just wanted to read a little bit from it just so our community, virtual community, could hear a little bit about it. And then I'll talk a little bit more about my impressions from the work. So this is from the opening of Ark of Bones. It's on page 9. Had I, he was following me. I knowed he was following me, but I just kept going like I wasn't paying him no mind. Had I, he never fished much, but I guess he knowed the river good as anybody, but he ain't know where the fishing was good. That's why I knowed he was following me. So I figured I better fake him out. I ain't want nobody with a mojo bone following me. That's why I was going
Mojo Bone.
along down river instead of up, where I know fishing was good. Had I, he hard to fool. Like I said, he knows the river good. One time I rode across the New Providence with him and his old man. His old man was drunk. Had I, he took the raft on across. Me and him. His old man stayed in New Providence, but me and Had I come back. That's when I know how good of a river rat he was. Now, Had I, he okay, except when he gets some kind of notion in that big head of his. Then he act crazy, trying to show off his age. He older than me, but he little for his age. Some people say reading too many books will stunt your growth. Well, on Head Eye, everything is stunted except for his eyes and his head. When he gets some crazy notion running through his head, then you can't get rid of him till you know what's on his mind. I know something was eating on him, just like I knowed it was him following me. I kept close to the path, lest he think I was trying to lose him. About a mile from my house, I stopped and peed in the bushes, and then I got a chance to see how Head Eye was moving along. Head Eye, he drooped when he walked. They called him Head Eye because his eyes looked bigger his head was when you looked at him sideways. Head Eye, about the ugliest guy I ever run up on. But he was good-natured. Some people called him Eagle Eye. He about the smartest one I ever met in that raggedy school too. But most of the time, when we called him Head Eye. He was always finding things and bringing them to school or to the cotton patch. One time, he found a mojo bone. I'm going to stop there. All right. Just to give you a little bit of this story. Not only does Henry Dumas put our focus on a place that we don't often see it in our culture, which is in through the eyes and the ears of children, Black children,
Yes.
but
Yes.
Black boys, right? These little boys. And in it, you get a sense of the mischievousness, right? How they kind of check each other, or what, we call it checking. I don't know what they call it in Indianapolis and Memphis.
No, you're right. You're right.
Call
You
it
got it.
checking, or I've heard people say jonesing, right? So that kind of playful craft of insults, right? How your nickname comes from the most, noticeable part of you, right? But also he was able to weave in not only the geography of the South, because he was born in Sweet Home, Arkansas, right? Even though he, traveled and moved throughout the country, A lot of his southernness never left his writing, right? And I think that's the thing that I connected to as a reader, because keep in mind, when I was coming of age, it wasn't necessarily the age in which people celebrated the works of like Zora Neale Hurston. They celebrated Langston Hughes. You might hear a teacher or two might mention the work, of course, of of Kane, right? You might hear Jean Toomer's work, right? But you didn't often read work that was written with Black vernacular and that was written in a way that not only honored and respected it and treated like it was a actual art form, right? That contained information and that we want to know, but it did it in a way that it just moved off the tongue, right? Magically, and it felt like truth, right? So there's an authenticity to his writing that really, really connected with me as a reader. Then the other thing is the traditional religion that's a part of it, right? There are so many references to hoodoo in not only in Ark of Bones and in Echo Tree, but in many of the other stories in it. And that's something that I don't know if people often discuss or recognize. If you think about works like I think it's Albert Roberto's book, Slave Religion, right? You think about it, we had 150 years of traditional Black religions being practiced amongst the enslaved Africans in America before they were ultimately kind of encouraged or forced to convert to Christianity, right? 150 years is a long time, right? Mm-hmm. A long time for a people who are sometimes said not to have created their own culture in America. Well, to me, the work of Henry Dumas puts the lie to that comment that Black Americans did not create their own culture, because it's all through his writing. It's all through his wonderful writing, particularly in this story. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the piece about speaking through the point of view of like Black boys and speaking in that Southern dialect, um, I think it speaks to sort of the fullness and unapologetic reverence that he like portrays our people with. He's not trying to convince anybody that Black people are one way or another, that we deserve this or that. I think that you can tell that um this is what he sees, and that this is this beauty and like this richness and the depth of like culture that like is depicted is how he perceives, our people,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that really, really shines through. Um, I also think that the piece about, just like this exploration of religions is very interesting, just because he was sort of like a student of religion. In my like reading on him, I learned that he, along with Christianity and traditional African religions, he also studied Islam, and just like I think he studied some Hinduism as well. I could be making that up, but I think I remember reading that. But yeah, so I think it's just it to me that sort of like synthesizing of different seemingly like disconnected cultural elements, I think is important, because that's really the foundation of our culture. I think that like when you think about like even though we have sort of been forced and encouraged to adopt Christianity, I think even today, you'll still find a lot of people with Christian practices that still do factor in hoodoo and the orishas, and just like I think that in a lot of ways, that's sort of, that is our cultural heritage. That is our cultural legacy. It's this like synthesis of things that have been like imposed on us, but also things that we have decided, we want to uplift and uphold for ourselves as well. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
All was not lost. It's in the language, it's in the music, it's in the rhythm, it's in the call and response, right? It's in the ring shout, right? The counterclockwise
yeah,
movement. All of these things help create the culture. And Ark of Bones is another story of his that's a coming of age, right? And you have these two characters where Head-Eye is, has this like mysterious kind of introduction through the eyes of Fishhound, right? To read too many books, it'll stunt your growth, So you have some of these kind of funny ideals that Fishhound has, right? And he's trying to lose him. But when they finally come together, you understand a little bit about why maybe Head-Eye was why Fishhound was trying to get on down from him. Because the first thing that Head-Eye says pretty much is the Ark is coming, And you just imagine a kind of mysterious child like that might be a little frightening in some ways, right? Weird, right? You're just trying to go get some brim or big, catfish or something, right? And he talking about the Ark is coming. It's like, what are you on? What are you on? But Fishhound discovers that Head-Eye is actually right. Something very mysterious is rising up out of the water, out of the rivers. And both Head-Eye and Fishhound become young witnesses to it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would be interested to hear you sort of speak about, the Ark of Bones itself, and just what is the significance of that?
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, I
okay.
think I'll leave it there.
When I first read it, I knew nothing about Colony and Coleman, Arkansas, Alabama. I knew nothing about the Clotilda, right? It was said to be the last American slave ship, right?
I just started reading Barracoon by Zora Neale Hurston.
Oh,
That's so
okay,
interesting.
excellent. And I feel like things always go full circle back to Zora Neale Hurston, right? Who was so ahead of her time, who was derided at the time when she was creating work for her love and passion for Black Southern traditions and culture, for her demanding that it gets the respect that it deserves, right? And that it be treated as with the same type of seriousness that other cultures, art forms are treated with, right? So I didn't know anything about that particular history. And so now, and for those who might not know, the Clotilda was a ship that that left Mobile, Alabama, long after slavery had been technically abolished in America, but not in practicality, actually, right? And so a white family who is actually still one of the wealthiest white families in that part of Mobile, Alabama to this day, went and commissioned basically this ship to go and kidnap Africans from the western coast of Africa. Stole about 109 people, maybe 111. I'm not sure the exact number. I have to go look that back up. And forced them on the ship and carried them across the ocean secretly into Mobile, deep where part of the area that's now called Africatown, right? And burned the ship, and sank it, and pretended like they didn't know it existed, but had all these people. And so, split them up, and a group of them ended up having to live as enslaved Africans in America, and help this family become more prosperous.
And another group built that Africa town. And when you go over there, it's right across from this family and all their rich paper mills, and it's fabulous to look at the graveyard, because they didn't have of course they couldn't go into town and trade and do all those things. So they built their own community out there. And so just going to look at the graveyard, and I think there's a family that the city doesn't, but they keep their graveyard in good condition, cutting the grass and mending the tombstones. But it's yeah, it Mobile. Yeah. The story went that it was a bet, and they burned it because it was against the law to import human beings for slavery. It was against the law. Northerners, somebody caught wind of it, and they were tracking them down, and they were going to prosecute them. Of course, nothing happened because they burned it in the port, took all the people off, and stashed the people out in the middle of nowhere. It's Black people are some special kind of take a licking and keep on kicking kind of folks. So the fact that you bring it up, it brings me back to having been there and
Oh,
looked at
wow.
the
So you've
tenacity.
been there and walked around. So when he brought up Barracoon, right? That is where Zora Neale Hurston interviewed what they thought at that time was the last living survivor of that ship. And I just looked it up. It was 110 people that were stolen from the Dahomey Kingdom in Africa. And it was 1860. Mind you, slavery had been abolished in 1807, or not abolished, but the importation of new people had been abolished. And it was Captain William Foster who left for West Africa, kidnapped 110 enslaved Africans from the Dahomey Nation there, and brought them to what was later called Africa Town by the descendants. And they now have, there's at least two documentaries, one called the Descendants that Questlove of the Roots did, because he has close lineage to that family there, to those survivors. And then another one called, I think what's another one that was on the Clotilda in particular as well. And I bring it up because the history around that community and some of the other towns around there is very stark, very difficult. That family was the Meaher family, Meaher. And not only did they profit from this illegal importation of and human trafficking, because that's what it was, right? Human trafficking, but they continued to do so long afterwards. I believe the people finally were able to purchase land, but they have always had, that family and others have always treated them very poorly. There's a lot of environmental racism. They have been basically poisoned in that area with the paper mills and the waste that comes from that and some of the other industry all around them. And it's just a very disrespectful thing, very similar to what was being done to the Gullah Geechee peoples in other areas, what the state of Georgia has done to the families of Sapelo Island and Hog Hammock. Just very disrespectful things are being done around it. But out of this darkness, they did not ever stop following the mystery of what happened to the Clotilda, and they found it. They found it in the deep, deep waters and pulled it up and proved what had happened, which they already knew, of course. And so there is now a museum. I don't know, Mrs. Fair, did you visit the museum? Had it been built at the time when you went there?
There was no museum there when I got there to that particular point. Now, in Montgomery, they got the Lynching Museum.
Yes.
And that other museum, but no, there was no
There's
museum,
a museum
there.
And I think there's complication around that too, because people throw up a museum, but who's going to profit from it, right? you know what I mean? So, but there's there, and I bring that up because for me, when I first read Ark of Bones, I didn't know about that, that very real history. But what I was definitely feeling was that this was like a ship that had come out, that it was that was part of that Middle Passage experience, that was part of the Ma'aba, and that it was rising up with those old souls that had sank or drowned, in that in that history, and in those horrors and those terrors that they tell us are we should forget, right? And that we should be over, even though there was never any atonement and never any reparation or restoration of justice, right? So that's what I was thinking of. it's not even just a matter of like Noah's Ark, right? Which was to save a certain group of people and some life forms to start again. This was a reminder of the history that you cannot bury. To me, it's a reminder of the cycle of terror that has to be faced, right, in order to create healing, right? You can't move on and grow for something that you don't acknowledge and that you don't truthfully acknowledge and face. And that's what the Ark of Bones represented to me when I first read it. Yeah. He says, bones. I saw bones. They were stacked all the way to the top of the ship. I looked around. The underside of the whole ark was nothing but a great bone house. I looked and saw crews of black men handling in the bones. There was a crew of 2 or 3 under every cabin around that ark. Why, there must have been 1,000,000 cabins. They were doing it very carefully, like they were holding onto babies or something precious. Standing like a captain was the old man we had seen top deck. He was holding a long piece of leather up to a fire that was burning near the edge of an opening which showed outward to the water. He was just reading that piece of leather. And it's just like, wow, these very stark spiritual images, right? It's frightening, but it's also kind of it's like a cosmic mystery, because you're being pulled into it. The more you read, the more you're like head eye. You want to know, or you're more like fish hound. You want to know what's happening. You want to know what the bones represent. Who are the caretakers of these bones? Where did they come from? And why are they rising up from this river, right?
Yeah. And I think that, just that added piece of like historical context about the Clotilda, and just that history, I think definitely for me reaffirms this idea of like, the responsibility of carrying that memory,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that understand. I think that like the significance of it being an arc is not lost on me because because but instead of like an arc of living things, it's an arc of the dead. So maybe some of that as well is like this idea of like we have to we not only can we not forget this history, can we not forget this context, but we also can't forget all the people that we've lost on our way here. And maybe that's the significance of Head Eye leaving on the arc. He's an addition to it, sure. He's another lost person, at least in the physical, but Fishhound won't forget. Um, and even though people won't believe him if he tells them, you know, uh, it's like, like it ends like, where'd you say Fishhound went? Like, well, I can tell you, I can tell you where all of our people are, you know? So, and yeah, I think that there's something heavy about that. I think that there's something a little somber about that, but I also think it is, I think that's part of, it's part of who we are too. And I think that maybe that's it. Like we have to embrace that heaviness. We have to like kind of like you said, in order to move on, we have to acknowledge that at some point. But yeah, I did want to give because it looks like we just had somebody join us in the Zoom room. Hello, is that Danian?
Yes, it is. Hello.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us. Is this your first time joining a Mumbo Jumbo?
Yes.
Welcome, welcome.
Mhm.
Oh no, what do you see?
Well,
Water dripping from the ceiling? That's not good.
Is that
Oh
our
boy.
ceiling in Suite B?
Hey, no other ceiling in here.
We might have talked too
um,
much about the Ark of Bones, because
yeah,
mhm.
it's coming to join. Yeah, see if y'all can find a bucket to put under that.
uh-oh, because there's a lot of water in this story. I mean,
Oh
as
boy,
somebody
oh
who
boy.
grew up along the Mississippi River, there's always so many tales like,
Mhm.
you got to be careful, in the way people think of the river, not only just this wonderful, beautiful, powerful ancient force that goes through the country, right? But also a place that, their people have maybe lost their lives or people have been disappeared in.
Mhm.
It's like a rolling cemetery to some extent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then when I think about the Ark of Bones story, there's also not only the Noah's Ark references, but also the Ezekiel wheel references, right?
Mhm.
The vision of having having this powerful, what do you call it? You're having the supernatural powers of the Mojo Bone, which you have to figure out what's the significance of the Mojo Bone. What is this? How does this connect to the story? But also this prophecy, right? That Hedi is referencing. So you got the valley of the dry bones, Noah's Ark, but also this idea that there's this future ahead of them where this particular vessel is going to carry the special people or carry the people who have experienced so much on the planet onto their rest, right? Carry them on to a place of peace or what have you. And that these young children are the ones who become the witness to it. And we're left at the end of the story to reflect on how that will impact them, right?
There's
Um,
that Afrofuturism.
it's absolutely Afrofuturism. It may also, I think, it was described by Amiri Baraka originally as Afro-Surrealism, right? So that was the term I believe that he used to describe the work of Henry Dumas, that it was surrealistic, right? Yeah, so that's definitely the original term for it was Afro-Surrealism, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
before we move on to the next story, I did, Danny, and since it's your first time, I'll explain a little bit. We
Mhm.
typically whenever at the start of the meeting, but then whenever anybody joins after the start, we have everybody do a quick check-in, which is just something that we do here in the Kepler space to make sure that we're maintaining an awareness of where everybody's at, what everybody needs, how everybody's doing, and so. What we'll have you do is we'll have you give a number and a color that are both supposed to kind of represent how you're feeling right now.
Mhm.
And then we'll also there's an icebreaker question as well. And today that question is what is one book that you take with you into the Afro future?
Mm. Um. Okay, a number like between what? What's the range of numbers?
A lot of people do 1 to 10, but you don't have to if you don't want to. It's up to you.
Okay. Well, if this is 1 to 10, like how I'm feeling,
Yeah.
I'll say like about a 5. I'm good. I'm about a 5, because I've just been like moving around a lot. I've been up like really early and just like, like really kind of stressed thin a little bit. And as far as color, I say maybe purple. I'm feeling kind of purplish. Just overcast and rainy, but I also been like reading, like doing a lot of work. I'm studying like on like ancient Kemet, and I know that's one of the,
Mm.
that's one of the colors that they really like to use. So I'm feeling, I guess, kind of purplish. If I had, okay, several books. What book would I take it to the Afro future with me? Uh, hmm. Let me narrow it down to one. I would take. I'd take the Reformatory.
Uh-oh. All right. All right. Another reviews
A
now.
reformatory. Okay.
Okay.
I
Why?
don't
Why
know
would you
that
choose
one.
the
Could you
reformatory?
I don't know that one. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, the Reformatory is like it's horror, but it's horror set in it's set in like this school for boys in Florida, and I think the school was actually real because there's another writer wrote about it. This guy named Colson Whitehead. He wrote about it too, but it's a very very powerful story. And it just it stayed with me for a while because of just at the way that it captures the mood of like the like Jim Crow and the danger of it, and it's just a reminder for me of like where we've been. So I would take it with me because I would read it, because it would be like just a reminder of where I don't want us to go. And I was just talking to someone earlier today, and I was, and I think a lot of Black people have been talking about this feeling of the United States sort of going back in time to a time maybe before they signed the Civil Rights Bill or whatever. So yeah, I would that would be the book, and then it's just a good book, and it's a really good blend of like horror and sort of like the dread that came along with living in like the Jim Crow South. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, and
interesting.
it's hard to tell which one is scarier. Is it the ghost, or is it the people, who the monsters? Which one is
Yeah,
scarier? So yeah, that's
yeah.
that. I would take that one.
Well, thank you for
It
Yeah.
sharing.
sounds
And if you,
like it sounds like Kindred. When people read Kindred,
mm,
they kind of get unnerved where she
Yeah.
comes back and forth
Yeah.
yeah,
through that invisible wall into
Yeah.
slavery and then back. And so,
Yeah.
as you speak of it, the horrors of that
Mhm.
slavery, and um, it wasn't even Jim Crow back then. It was just out and out
Yeah.
chattel slavery. But
Right.
yeah. Hmm.
and if you don't mind me, if you don't mind my asking, how'd you find out about the conversation tonight, and what made you
Um.
decide to come through?
Yeah. Well, I follow Sheree. I follow Kepler too. So So I saw it on the news. I saw it on online.
Hmm.
Enough
But say
said.
you follow that author.
Yes. Yes, I do very closely.
Wonderful. Yeah, well, thank you very much for joining us. We had just, if, do we have any more thoughts on Ark of Bones, or are we ready to move on to Echo Tree?
Let me see. Oh, I don't want to spoil it. We don't want to spoil the ending, right?
Of what?
Ark of Bones. Just say that in the ending of Ark of Bones, we're all a witness. We all become a witness.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A spiritual
yeah,
member. Yeah, we all become a witness.
yeah.
Just say that. Yeah,
Love it. Love
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
So then let's go ahead and move on to our next story today, Echo Tree. Um, which I don't know. I think reading, because in this edition, Echo Tree comes right after Ark of Bones. And for me, like, one, I found it really interesting, just kind of like how similar the stories are,
Mhm.
just in terms of like how they feel, and like the structure, and what it feels like is kind of happening there, on a spiritual level, if that makes sense. However, there are some. I do think that this one is maybe a little bit less somber. Maybe not. Maybe not. Because it does sort of, yeah, it does sort of start with, it's these two boys, and they are sort of processing a loss.
Mhm.
One of their brothers has passed away.
Mhm.
And there's this story that one of them tells the other about, this echo tree that's supposed to, curse you basically if you don't, pay it its proper respect. You know, and they as Sheree said, they run through this game, checking each other, testing each other a little bit, and through this sort of like interaction, through this sort of like, almost through play, but it's also kind of like a ritual, I would say, in a lot of ways. They come to, um, they come to know this spirit a little bit better, and I think there's also something in it where it's about, they're communing with the spirit of this young man's brother as well. So I think that, very similar to, uh, the way that I read it was like similar to Ark of Bones, which is about, or it could be read as being about, the memories of this journey, the memory of, the legacy of our people. I think Echo Tree is really about, the things that people leave behind, the stories that they tell, the way, the echoes, and just like the way that those the things that people say to us, the things that people teach us, they stick with us, you know. And I don't know. I feel like anybody who has like I feel like maybe if folks have had an experience where they have like you know you talk bad on somebody that's passed, and then you start stubbing your toe on stuff, and you start dropping stuff, and da 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 da, and it's like, okay, well, maybe I'm not haunted, net per se, but clearly some spirit has become upset with me, and so to me, like that's what it kind of is like, the echo tree will trip you up, if you curse it. And there was one more thing that was interesting to me that did remind me of Zora Neale Hurston piece that I read. I'm trying to find the exact passage. Uh, trying to find. Oh yeah. So uh the exchange goes like this. I warned you once it. If you curse again, not even me and Leo put together and your grandpa too can save you from tainting. What am I doing? Talking too loud like you don't believe in nothing. And it's like that stuck out to me as very powerful. Um I I was reading High John the Conqueror, which is a folk tale story by Zora Neale
Yeah.
Hurston about High John the Conqueror.
Yeah.
And in it, she's talking to her aunt Shady Ann about this
Mm-hmm.
myth in quotation marks, of course, of High John. And one of the things that she says that her aunt said to her that has not left my mind since, her aunt says to her something along the lines of like, don't be one of those Negroes that's so educated that you don't believe in nothing no more.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, talking too loud like you don't believe in nothing, that is the same sentiment to me. This idea that we can become so confident in our understanding, in what we've been taught by this world around us, specifically, by the white world, by our oppressor, or however you want to regard them, that we can come to disregard the other things that are true
Mm-hmm.
and the other
Yeah.
things that are real, being the spirits, that act on us in ways that we
Mm-hmm.
can't understand or always communicate, the realness of like our ancestors and the memories that they leave with us. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was something that stood out to me, but I'll I'll
Absolutely.
I'll pass the mic on.
Yeah, for me, the echo tree is really about the rituals that we come up with to process sadness, to
Yeah.
process
Mhm.
profound grief. Um, it's also kind of the regional divide of the community. You have one boy who, it's no longer in the South, right? He's
Mm,
gone to New York, right? And then you
big
have
boy,
who's
yeah.
very much rooted in the land, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea of the echo tree is what is described as spirit talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's also again echoing on that call and response.
Mm-hmm.
Say the name, or where you share the name of your ancestors that have passed on, right? As a way of veneration and celebration of them, and acknowledging that our lives are like concentric circles, and the circle that is their life also echoes out and touches us, and then that
Right.
will continue on. Our lives will echo and touch others, and it will just continue on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, or like an eddy in the river, right? Where you
Mm-hmm.
drop a stone in it, or the stone skips across the water. I remember writing a story of how Suki got free, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
about this ideal transformation, to you becoming a stone
Mm-hmm.
and skipping across the river into freedom. So the spirit talk is a way to stay connected, not only to the very real flesh part of your grief,
Mm-hmm.
where it's in your body, it's in your bones. You wake up, it is with you. You go to sleep, it is with you. because that person is not in this realm anymore. But
Mhm.
how do you tap back into that spirit, right? And the tree is supposed to be the vessel for that. And I think that's a very powerful ideal that he's using the trees. Of course, a lot of Henry Dumas's work is elemental, right? In
Mhm.
bones, we have the river, right? We have the
Mhm.
river in the bones. And in Echo Tree, it's the southern, the soil, it's the clay of the south, but it's also the trees, it's the timber, right?
Mhm.
The trees that we would have, cut down and carved out a drum, right?
Right.
Which was another way of communicating. As Dr. Redmond said, the percussiveness of Henry Dumas's work, right?
Mhm.
All of that's in there. There is another great writer, John Oliver King, excuse me, John Keene, John Keene, another great writer who wrote the introduction
Oh yeah.
to this edition of the Echo Tree, and he calls Henry Dumas's work visionary fiction, right? In which vernacular cultures, he says, let me make sure I get this quote right. Vernacular cultures, folk spiritual and religious practices are heralded, right, in
Mhm.
this. And I think about what would have made Henry Dumas write this in 1961. Why, because I think about when people write stories, they get inspired by different things. There's a different reason why they're writing it, but also then you might have a reason for writing it, but there's a reason also for you sharing it, right? Because everything we write, we don't share every single thing that we write. At least I don't. I don't, everything that I write, I don't share. I don't have this impulse that I gotta publish everything that I write. But there's some things that you write and you do want it to be communicating. You do want to pass it on because it may be a tool. It may resonate with someone else, right? It
Mhm.
may be a record of things. So what was happening in America in 1961, where Henry Dumas believed that we needed an echo tree, you know? What were the things that were happening?
Civil rights movement.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
we're being picked off one by one, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, one by one being picked off.
Mhm.
And these were young leaders,
Mhm.
young, right?
Mhm.
19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds. Um,
Yeah.
They wanted to be a part of casting off the oppression they had been under, they had seen their folks under. They were the new generation. If it is to be, it is up to us. Will we
Mhm.
live on our knees? We gonna stand up. Girl, we had some sayings.
we need to bring them back.
I graduated from Wayne State University back in 1969.
Mhm.
And girl, I'm telling you, we wore hair, make your hair look like a little afro.
Mhm.
And all of us that didn't have hair that would stand up like that, we would wash it and tie it to strip out the natural oils and everything so it would stand up even higher. Because if it wasn't as big as Angela Davis, then you wasn't saying nothing.
You wouldn't say nothing at all.
But the young people who went down and they weren't even from there. They weren't even from there, but they felt like, and they were from oppression. You know, never feel like there was no covert and many times overt segregation in the North. They just never think that. But these young people said, "Hey, we can start somewhere, and we can look at the face of this oppression, this mean spirit, this dehumanizing. We can look it straight in the face." And this is before TV picked up and was televising all of the deaths and in the water hose and those people down there felt like, hey, we've been doing it this way. We gonna keep on. White people felt like we've been doing this way. We gonna keep on doing this way, and we live here, y'all don't, and we gonna get rid of you. And
Mhm.
you know, it's sometimes it's romanticized how the young people went down there in their finest, because back in those days, you didn't go anywhere without your suit on and your super shoes and
Right.
your shirt ironed, and they went down there in their very best. And it for all of us who came out of it okay, we forever owe an ode to the ones who went down and suffered under that mean nastiness, and some who lost their lives. And so I love the vernacular of Dornell Harrison's books, and I was always sorry that she wasn't as recognized during the Harlem Renaissance as others were.
Yeah.
Like, thankfully for Alice Walker, keeping her name alive, and taking the grass off the top of her grave and putting the tombstone on it and letting it be known, or Spike Lee putting a quote from her novel in his movie, that's that launched the curiosity of so many viewers, right? To go and I feel that way about Dr. Redmond as well, and the work he's doing to make sure that we never forget the work of Henry Dumas. I think about the vivid images in the work in Ark of Bones, the idea of those bones just rising up out of the river, out of the Mississippi River, right? To create this new thing. And I think about those souls that were lost there, right? I think about also this tree. And like you said, some people lost their lives at the end of these movements, right? So it's not just a matter of, okay, we fought for this, but also, or they represented the violence and the ignorance of racism, right? And white supremacy, but, or white insecurity, as one of my says. It's like, it's not no supremacy, it's insecurity that's driving this, fears that they can't compete. But also this sense that that there are people that to be mourned, right? There are people that we need to take the time to mourn. I keep thinking about what happened to the family in Philadelphia, the Move family. How there hasn't been any justice for that family. There hasn't been any justice for that family. And in fact, the disrespect continues, because every other year it seems like they're coming up with finding another remains of the children that was being used in some kind of bizarre anthropological studies at these universities in Pennsylvania. Why do you even have these children's remains? Why weren't they passed on to their family? Why are you studying these Black children's remains who were murdered by their own government? And not in the 1960s, not in the 40s, not in the 1800s, but in the 1980s. A whole block blown up. And
now, I think that that makes me think about this. You brought up a really important point, I think, when you brought up this conversation between the rural, the rural Black people versus the city Black people, because, I think they're first, that sort of like separation is present in a lot of his stories. There are a lot of stories that take place in the city. There are a lot of stories that take place in the country. There are a lot of stories that take place, between people who are from both, and so to me, that's like, that brings up the question to me is like, okay, well, what is the significance of these two different sort of environments in our history, in our culture? And I think it almost represents sort of like, to me, I see like the rural side as like you said, it's spiritual, it's traditional, it's connected to the land, whereas I think the cities, one, this historically the cities played a role as uh I'm going to say like an imagined sanctuary, a place where Black people went to in an attempt to escape some of the prejudice of the South, of the more rural areas, etc. But like you said, the bombing of the Move House was in Philadelphia. The cities were no less racist, or discriminatory. It just took different shapes and different forms, and he speaks to that in some of his other stories. One of which I think we'll be talking about in the next session. So, but I I think that to me, when you pull together, like um we've got this traditional basis that is really rooted in our ancestors and where we come from. That's really has roots in the country, and then we have this more futuristic basis that's rooted in the cities. That's more about like uh, where do we go next? How do we
Mhm.
build? How do we grow?
Mhm.
Um, and I think that like when you pull those things together, that's when you start to see these like radical movements of like
Mhm. Yeah.
the Black Power movement, the Black Arts movement, the Black Identity movement. Like to me, like those are the synthesis of this like the sort of like the city mind and the country mind. You
Mm.
know, um, so yeah, I don't know. I think that was just something that I've been thinking about. As folks have been talking, is like is what's this? What is what's the significance of the country and the city and the relationship between them?
Mhm. Yeah. I like to add something to the
Please,
conversation.
please do.
Um, like everything I'm hearing, and it just has me thinking about like the land, like land is being sacred, and why, like as far as like the ancient custom of like burying placenta in the land, and also just the fact that our ancestors are buried in the land as well. So I think like and it's interesting like this idea of like the echo tree, and I think Sheree mentioned also the idea of rippling, rippling throughout, and we're like echoes in the sense that we are like echoes of our ancestors. You get what I'm saying? So it's like the ideas that were born in them, that created that were created by them, but also their experiences. Their experiences are in us, and so it's like we're tied to the land in that way as well. So it's also our responsibility, you know, to heal the land, and
Yeah,
and bring about the healing that our ancestors wanted, and especially here in the United States, you know. Yeah, definitely, definitely, and just this idea that like, and just this idea that something else y'all brought up, just the idea of like sometimes we forget that the world that we live in is not 100% tangible and material. It's half tangible, but it's half spiritual as well. You know, so that's that whole idea what you were talking like bringing, like you got the rural, but you have the city mindset, and they both actually they function together. I was listening to this brother talk the other day, and he was talking about the fact that like living in the city, just something simple as being in the city and like never walking on grass barefoot. Actually, like that affects your health. That affects your mental health. Like you have to take some time to like really like people, especially black people, like we should take time to like walk on grass with no shoes on. Like we need to stay in touch with the land, you know.
yeah,
People say it almost as an insult, like, oh, so and so needs to touch grass, but it's very important to be grounded, right?
Yeah.
It's,
yeah,
I mean, it's very physically to have the soles of your feet touch
Mhm.
the earth. right?
And
Flows in the earth.
I feel like people don't really think about how weird it is that you can be in a place and there is no dirt or
Yes.
grass or
Mhm.
trees anywhere to be seen. I think about that when I'm downtown sometimes. I look around and I'm like,
Mhm.
it's all just concrete and glass and metal. That we're good with that? Yeah, it's strange to me.
Yeah,
It's strange to me.
And
Yeah.
I just said, for the echo tree, one of the things I wanted to look at was more about Henry Dumas's life, because I love his work so much and just so curious about, if we have information about his process and craft and everything. And when we're talking about regional stuff, he was a son of the South, but he was educated in the North as well. He was studying at Rutgers, and he encountered, he was a colleague, I think, a peer of the poet Jay Wright. And Jay Wright has talked about the poetry of Henry Dumas and, some of the things that he did. And he would go to gospel performances, go to churches and photograph the singers while they performed, right? And there are some interviews of, I think in one of the introductions, excuse me, that Jay Wright wrote on his work, he talked about Henry Dumas also trying to capture, the call and response, and have that as part of his memory as he's writing. I think also about the tradition of the spirit trees. The spirit trees, depending on where you are in the South, you may find glass bottle trees, right?
Mhm.
Similar to what you would find in other Caribbean cultures, right? All of us are cousins, who were taken from the same peoples, right? And
I'm
drawn.
not I don't could you speak to that tradition a little bit? I don't think I'm
Yeah.
familiar.
So in I guess in the South we have, you sometimes will see glass bottle trees. The glass bottle trees is like a tree where they'll put glass bottles on it, and the ideal is to capture bad spirits so that they're not interacting with you and your family around your home, right? So the glass bottle, like they are attracted to the glass, to the light, and they're in there, and anything that's bad will get burned up in the sun, right? They're captured.
Mm.
So this the glass bottle trees are very beautiful. A lot of times they're just whatever glass bottles you may have from beer, drinking, what have you. But the most powerful ones are the cobalt blue, paint blue, the dark blue glass bottles are the most powerful ones. And you may have seen some of those traditions with um, like the trim around doors, maybe painted a specific shade of blue, or the shutters on windows, or the vestibule, or the gazebo may have these blue colors, and it's supposed to have a spiritual significance. Spirit trees are connected to like the tree of life, right? The tree of life. And on the continent of Africa, there are many, many old trees, right? But I believe the oldest ones are a particular kind of baobab tree, right? Which represents the oldest, not only the oldest tree in Africa, but the spirit trees. And it's the place where not only the community may gather and the elders may come, and and knowledge is passed down, or decisions are made, right? If there disagreements in the community, but the spirit tree is also the place where there's like spiritual power, right? So when Daniel was talking about the placenta of the baby, newborn baby, probably being buried in the earth, it often would be buried amongst the roots of an old tree, right?
Yeah.
Particular tree, which
Right.
is why sometimes some mothers are very particular about making sure that they have that placenta when they leave. If they've given birth, they don't want the hospital to keep it for whatever,
Mhm.
That was my mom. Yep.
yeah, they're going to take that with them, because this is a part of the connecting the veil between our realm and the realm of our ancestors and God. All of this is in that story. And what was happening, not only when he wrote it, not only was he studying at Rutgers or what have you, but also, and watching Black culture as it was experienced in the actual community, but he was also grieving because he had lost a loved one as well. He lost his brother at that time. And so the story, Echo Tree, is about processing grief and coming to terms with whether or not you believe. in another world, whether you believe in afterlife, do you believe in these other forces, you know? And how do these trees ground us? Trees are grounded, right? Trees are
Yeah.
grounded in many ways, right? Um, and they ground the earth quite literally, the ecosphere that they are part of, but they communicate as well. And I believe it's the oak trees that communicate the furthest with their roots being connected. They can communicate with other trees that are miles and miles away from them. That's from their root system, you know.
In
So
fact, it is said I lost a tree, a Norwegian maple. It was a beautiful thing, and it just caught a disease. And it, but when it had to be cut down, I said, "Well, please leave at least 3 feet of the trunk so I can just go out there and just speak to the tree." And the person, the arborist who came through and was helping me deal with, I was losing the tree and putting another tree in. And he told me that this tree is not dead. That this tree will, the roots on this tree will help the new tree survive because trees help each other like that. The older, mature ones, even though they're sick or even though that, they're 30, 40 years old, they're helping the new ones to keep growing. They'll start losing their leaves or losing their limbs, but they help the new ones. So yeah, you're right about that communication system.
they echo tree, they echo wisdom to the new tree to keep it
I,
community growing, right?
I think it like adds another level of significance to this idea of like, having roots somewhere, having roots that run deep, it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's not even about like
Mm-hmm.
I'm locked in here, it's not even about it, but it's like this like network, of like resources that I can access, through this relationship to other beings in my ecosystem. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's all beautiful. Um, do you have anything that you wanted to
How we love
add?
him, Dumas. Your mind can go
Anything at
all
all?
kinds of places reading his
I
work.
do have some extra questions. But all right, it's about 7:34, so do we want to go ahead and move on to the last one for today?
Yeah, let's go ahead and then wrap it up
Hell
with
yeah.
will the circle be unbroken? Yeah.
What so this
Story. Some 105.
yeah, 105, and this one was one of my personal favorites, man. Um so yeah, I can go ahead and summarize this one as well unless you'd like to do the honor,
Go
Sheree.
ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so one of my personal favorites of the anthology, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? And it basically takes place all in a jazz club. And as these brothers are playing, they've got their little ensemble going, they're tearing it up. And some curious white folks come and they try to get into the jazz club. And initially the bouncers are telling them, no, this is not for you. You don't want to be here, but they're insistent, they as white people are, they push, and so eventually the manager or whoever's running the club lets the bouncer know. It's like, all right, come on, let him in. And they make it in because, and so the reason that they want to come in is because they want to hear the Afro horn. The person playing that night, that's like their signature. That's what he's famous for, you know. And they're really curious to hear this Afro horn. And they get in and they listen through the set, and when he plays it, they all fall dead. um so yeah, so that's it's a little bit shorter. um and I'll read actually the last little exchange of the I'll read the last little paragraph of the story real quick. The musician stood. The horn and the probe drew up the shadows now from the audience. A child, what'd you say? A child climbed upon the chords of sound, growing out of the circle of the womb, searching with fingers and then with motive, and as the volume of the music increased, penetrating the thick callousness of the Irishman, twirling his stick outside of black flesh, the musicians walked off one by one, linked to Probe's respectful nod at each and his quiet pronouncement of their names. He mopped his face with a blue cloth. What's the matter here? Step aside, folks. These people are unconscious. Look at their faces. They're dead. Dead? What happened? Dead? It's true then. It's true. So, yeah. And so first, I just think this story is hilarious. I think it's just a very quick and clean fable about mind the business that minds you.
Yeah.
Mind the business
But
that pays you.
yeah.
Yeah.
But on a deeper level, I hadn't learned about this mythology of the Afro horn up to this point. Um, uh, and so this like encouraged me to dig deeper, and I found out that it has roots in Sun Ra's orchestra,
Mhm.
and basically this idea that it's this mythical instrument that in playing it unites black people and black cultures, and sort of like brings us all together, creates this framework or foundation that we can move into the future with. So that was really interesting, and I think that the um and I think this is the last thing that I'll say. I think that, like, what it really speaks about to me is this idea of you know almost just like building relationships with other communities, with people outside of our community. And what that makes me think of is the N word. There's this, at least amongst my generation, there is this seemingly endless debate about who can and can't say it. Oh, well, my black friend said I could. Does that mean I was raised in this community? My parent is half this, whatever. And I think what all of those really all very shallow takes, very shallow understandings of why there are limitations on
Mhm.
who, or I guess what I'll say, why some people place limitations on who can and can't use that word. And to me, it's not really about the word itself and whether or not folks find it offensive. Some definitely do, and we could talk about the merits for that. But to me, it's more about the basic concept of respect and decency. If we are going to be in relationship with each other, if you're a white person and you can't hear me as another human being telling you earnestly that you saying this particular thing in these circumstances makes me uncomfortable, if you can't hear that and you just keep insisting that you have it your way, why would I want to be friends? Why would I want to be in community with you? And so,
Right.
in a lot of ways, I see that sort of same, like, I think it comes down to entitlement, and I think it comes down to um this sort of like mismatch about, like, the entitlement that non-black people feel black people owe to them, and the respect that those same non-black people feel they owe to black people. And I think that in this, it's just like a very clear communication of like the consequences of failing to honor the the culture, and the traditions and the people that you're seeking to be in space with, you know?
Mhm.
And this is a hyperbolized example, a dramatic and theatrical example, but I think it's very real. Um, don't come into black space thinking that everything black is for you.
Yes.
And heed the warnings,
Mhm.
when we're trying to tell you, look, man, this is not for you. we're doing that not just for our safety and comfort, but for yours as well. Yeah, and so that's my interpretation of this one.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I never thought about like European universalism and like European Eurocentric like hegemony in that way, and the way that white people, the way Europeans like they like it's a colonization of everything, not just people, not land, but just art and knowledge, right? And so I like this idea of like just like push back against that, and also the idea of like this Afro horn, but like that makes me think like in Jamaica, oh man, it was like it wasn't Stony Brook, like it was a rebellion where like the same thing, like they played a horn, right? And the horn they played, like when they played the horn, like when the black people heard, like you either had to, you knew you were going to either fight or you had to run, right? And there's this thing, right, with black art and black music, right, that oppressors have always feared, right? They they fear black art, and not in the sense that like they fear it because like like this radical, but like literal fear, that like that harm, that the art, it's that our art can defend us, that our art can do harm to them. We already know like about the drums and thing, but yeah, there's definitely like there's a horn that they played in Jamaica,
A
like
ding,
when
a
they
cow
would
horn,
rebel, huh?
the cow horn, a
Yeah,
bing.
yeah, yeah. And they would play it, and like, and it was just a signal to let the people, it's time to fight, and they would come together. But yeah, they definitely like the white, like the British that ruled Jamaica, like they were afraid of that horn. And there's accounts of them talking about the rebellions, like when they heard the horn, like they knew that something was about to happen, like they had to like kind of, like I said, they had to run or defend, or something like that. And so it also makes me just think about like our art, and most particularly our music, and like the like when it's like in its pure form, the the revolutionary power of it, the liberatory power of it. And it doesn't matter if it's reggae, rap, jazz. We see it pretty much in every, in every
Yep.
genre. Whether we talking
Yep.
about like I was talking about somebody like Billie Holiday, you know. Yeah, so it's like yeah, that's what I was thinking about just now.
Okay. For me, the Will the Circle Be Unbroken was a story that I reprinted in Dark Matter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in Dark Matter, I think it was Reading the Bones. I had Ark of Bones in the first Dark Matter
Mm-hmm.
century of speculative fiction for the African diaspora. And the thing about this story is that for Ark of Bones, it's the spiritual, power of water, of the river, right? For Echo Tree is the spiritual power of the trees, right? And the land, right? The soil in which we emerge. And for this one is the spiritual power of music, right? The transformative power of it as well. But that gatekeeping issue that you brought up earlier is such a powerful thing, because in the beginning of the story, John, who's the tenor sax, right? He'd done some sets with Probe, who's like the main character in this. And so he felt like, hey, we did some jam sessions before. I should be welcome to sit down and riff with you, because that's what jazz musicians do, right? They
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
they vibe, they get inspired by each other. They that's how they grew. That's how they do. So he wasn't thinking that this would be anything different. And he didn't believe that because he had been warned, he'd been told that this is something new, and you need to stay away, right? This is not necessarily for you. Well, once the thing about because of our history here, and I'm sure it's experienced differently throughout the diaspora and throughout Africa and the many nations there. Once you have welcomed someone into the community, into your culture, even if you didn't welcome them, even if they just showed up in the middle of your thing, they just showed up in the middle of you doing your thing, right? It's very difficult when you have a imbalanced power dynamic to gatekeep. And in our shores in America, it's very difficult to gatekeep Black culture because it has become the lingua franca of American culture. There is not a single musical art form I can think of that's distinctly discussed as American that Black Americans have not innovated and created, right? Including, I found out more recently, the grunge music.
Yeah.
Right? Tina Bell, right? So we think of Nirvana, but it was the sister doing it before him.
Nirvana,
It has been erased practically.
Yeah,
Nas back there nodding his head. Yep.
And she was being erased at the time she was creating the music, right? As it is. And it's easy to do that to Black women, right? Because if we're looking at this social caste system that Isabel Wilkerson has written about so eloquently and caste in her other books, to be woman, obviously you have a less amount of power in this society, and then to be Black, right? Right. The group can just climb right over your back, right? So if you're trying to gatekeep something that a Black woman created, God help you, right? You're trying to gatekeep something that Black people created in general. Everyone in the world feels like they have access to it because of the American imperialism system, right? It's being pumped out all over the world. I just left Amsterdam, and in the entire time we're at my hotel, all I'm hearing is Black music. I can't even tell you what Dutch music sounds like because I didn't hear it. I'm hearing us. I'm in Chengdu. I'm helping China, and there aren't that many. Obviously, they're not used to seeing my face there, right? But I'm walking through the town, and I'm seeing Black culture. All the way in Chengdu with the land of the pandas, right? Go through the temple to see their ancient, or original people. And I believe I saw some melanated peoples. But that's a whole nother conversation, even though the Chinese scientists have, of course, tracked their ancestry. And of course, it takes them back to Africa, like we already knew. You didn't even have to spend that money, but we're let you keep doing this every 10 years, hoping you'll find a different answer. I don't know what is going on with that, because that wasn't even the first time they'd done that, but I digress. The point is, it's very difficult to gatekeep anything, right? And then you have a group of you who don't want to gatekeep because they're so busy trying to be in the Rainbow Coalition. Not that I'm being critical of it, but they so much want to be at the promised land of equity and
they want that money.
Yeah, or just to be able to this not even be much of a hang up, because it didn't used to be a hang up amongst the early societies. The Roman Empire, if you think about it, had all kinds of people in it, and they weren't tripping about people's melanin, whether or not they could survive the sun or not, right? That wasn't the demarcation at the time, right? It was knowledge and power was the issue. Do you have knowledge? Do you have power? Right? Do you have culture that we can learn from? We can build on? Do you have something we can tax? Okay. You had all kinds of people, but today, once they created scientific racism, here we go with these demarcations. And the thing about it is, with this story, because there's such a patronizing, condescending attitude towards Black culture, because it's so ubiquitous. And it is the thing, it is the moment, it is the exciting. We're always innovating, right? People want to be a part of it. They want to be a part of it. And because of this power dynamic, they can take it, they can monetize it, they can corporatize it, they can, mainstream it. And then they will work to erase the origins. Like I'm looking at K-pop. How are you talking about K-pop? You can't talk about K-pop and you're not talking about Black rhythm If you're not talking about R&B, what are you talking about? They literally
Mhm.
watch you like a test that they're going
Mhm.
to take. They watch everything we do. You know, I think I had this conversation with a few Afro-Europeans about this. Like there's this kind of resentment of American imperialism, right? And I understand it because there are military bases all over the world, right? And and then that, American culture is being pumped out where other cultures, local cultures are not being, it's not reciprocated, right? We don't get to receive and learn as much about their culture as they learn about us, right? But at the same time, they seem not to be able to make a move without looking at our movements first, right? They're studying our civil rights leaders. They're translating our speeches and things. They're looking at our protest movements and figuring out how to adapt them to where they are, because of course they're experiencing very similar horrific injustices, right? As being Black people in these other countries, right? So we could all learn from each other, but there isn't that respect, right? So I guess for me, when I read the story, I have a lot of feelings about it. I resent the people who don't gatekeep anything, who always inviting fools to the picnic. I don't want all these people at the cookout. They don't know how to act at the cookout. So, like everybody doesn't need to be at the cookout. I'm not at everybody else's cookout. We're not getting invited to their cookouts. So what's going on? And also this idea, also the people who are so, like you said, so quick to monetize everything. Like everything isn't up for sale, and everything doesn't need to be in public. All conversations don't need to be in public. And other people understand it about their own thing. They're very good about gatekeeping their own things to some extent, right? Mm-hmm. But no one seems to feel like Black Americans should be able to gatekeep anything, right? Somebody was talking to me about Afro beats, and I said that's lovely, but Afro beats comes from James Brown. You wouldn't have it without funk. You wouldn't have it without James Brown. You wouldn't have Fela without James Brown. So I just feel like this story, when they said, watch out for the Afro horn, this, you might not want to come to this set. And they're like, well, this is my friend, and I get to, we performed before, and I don't believe in this mumbo jumbo, right? I don't believe in this, superstitious nonsense, right? Mm-hmm. And you find out, and it's just like the story is a cautionary tale. Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny, right? It's a dark, kind of satirical tale as well, but mm-hmm. It is a cautionary tale about how the culture is celebrated but not respected all the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think when you said you read it and have a lot of feelings, I feel you, because it's like well, one thing that I think is like this piece around gatekeeping is very interesting to me, just because of, like you said, how hard it is to gatekeep anything when you don't really have the keys to the gate, like most Black people don't really, Black artists don't really have a say in what their record label does with their music, and those Black people that do have that say really don't have motivations that are different, all that different than the white record label owners. It's all about furthering this sort of like cultural imperialism, this expansion, like the reason that we have to bulldoze over everybody else's culture to put American stuff in front of them is because that's the only way that we can ensure that they'll be buying our cultural exports, I think it all goes back to imperialism, and
they can't separate us sometimes from that imperialism. Because last time I checked, I wasn't doing that wasn't me, right? That wasn't us as people. That's a different power structure than the Black community. You know what I mean?
And we're not making the choice, but it's another form of exploitation of our work and labor. That's really what this country is built off of. Like we're gonna do it anyway. We're gonna grow that food. you know, because we got to eat as well. We're going to make that music and we're going to make this art because we got to, you know, enjoy it and express ourselves as well. And then they're going to pick it up and they're going to ship it off somewhere. And the other thing that I was thinking about is that when when you make stuff for everybody or when you are forced to make stuff for everybody, some of that power has to be taken out, you know? Like you can't play jazz music with the afro horn in it for everybody cuz well we see why. You know, some people can't take it, you know? And so, you know, you kind of have to like to expand to reach the broadest audience, you have to water things down, and in that watering down and removing of those like elements that are really unique and powerful, you also lose that, you know, because the afro horn is this instrument that's supposed to unite and bring us together. But when we make it safe and palatable for everybody, we lose that unifying factor as well, you know. And so I think if anything, I'd say that's another reason why it's so important that our stuff is mainstreamed and made available for the mass media, because that prevents us from using it for what it's really for. You know, that
Oh,
prevents
they
us from
try. Okay, so now you don't brought us up
yeah.
onto the thing. They try. So I'm thinking of two different things. One thing is the ideal of um the fact that while we were creating images of ourselves, I think of people like Oscar Michelle, and then it's also the wonderful novelist and scholar Andrea Hairston talks about cinema history and how before the Hollywood system was set up and created, that so many different people, indigenous people, Native Americans and American Indians, which, you know, every term that they're comfortable with, Black people, Latinos, all kind of people in the country, regular people, had access to the cameras and were doing their own motion picture films. They were all doing their own home movies and their own everything, right? So it was like the way you think about the internet or social media when it first started popping. You know, everybody, their mom had access to it and they were doing all kinds of cool things with it. Then a system got in place where they began to
Yeah.
control it, right?
Yeah.
And so once they started doing that, the images for Black people are already being messed up. Keep in mind, we've been in chains for many, many centuries. And during those centuries, that there was a very conscious ideal of a machine that was pumping out horrific, derogatory images of Blackness, right? All around the country and around the world. So that there were people who never even met a single Black person in their lives, but they thought you were a darkie. They thought you know, you know, they thought you were the gold rush, the golden twins, like the soapbox images, all these minstrelsy images, right? They pump that out through the minstrelsy shows, blackface, etc. I don't know. I don't know nothing about birthing babies. All these different images. Tom and Jerry cartoons where you only see the housekeeper's
Oh
leg.
yeah.
You know what
Oh
I
yeah.
mean? You know, you hear the voice, like all these images, even Mickey Mouse. Uh, you know, all these just images, right? That are not necessarily the images that we created for ourselves, right? Gets
Yeah.
pumped out. And so that's the advertisement for Blackness all over the world, right?
Yeah.
And so when they meet you, they don't even know if you're real or not because they've had these other images. You think about Woodrow Wilson, who is like Trump is like the Woodrow Wilson of today, right? Bringing in Birth of a Nation and having it screened at the White House, the most violent and horrific hit job of Black images that you could think of, right? To that created and really kind of cemented the idea of the Black man as this violent beast over, you know, the Black women as over sexualized creatures that cannot be raped and all these other things, right? That's pumped out all over the place. And then you're being asked to give them, to make sure they have the right to vote and that they can work in your communities. Like it was a propaganda machine set up to make sure that you were dehumanized and that your access to citizenship in the country was limited, right? So you have that going on. Then you fast forward it to now to the, you know, contemporary times when you have a system, a music system that has figured out how to profit off of private prisons, has figured out how to do the psychological damage of people through culture, right? By promoting only gangster rap and
Mm.
really pushing down conscious rap to the point where people think, oh, all the thing that they're doing is gangster rap, which was not true. It was the thing that was the music that was being lifted up.
Yeah.
And I think Danian can speak more to that about what was happening with conscious music, hip hop, and what was going on with the other kind of hip hop, which we know which one was being pushed out the
Yeah.
most and celebrated. Yeah. That's
Mhm.
that was an intentional thing though. But yeah.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely intentional. Um, and it's it's sad too. I was listening to KRS-One early. I was listening to Boogie Down Productions, and they came out like in '89. Well, the album I was listening to came out in '89. I just couldn't help but think. I was emotional listening to it because I couldn't help but think like how much it changed my life. Like literally, like listening to that music and like a lot of the things, like it set me on a path of consciousness, you know. Um, so
It made you want to read different books,
it
go
made
seek out things,
yeah
find the
because
references.
yeah
You
because
know.
yeah because like the books were not on the books were in the songs, and then the rappers literally would say, okay, well, I read this book and I wrote this rap. Like that's how I learned. That's how I encountered Stolen Legacy for the first time was through rap. Through a song. That's how I learned about Malcolm X. I never heard about especially like being in the South. Um, I had never heard like when I was in junior high. I had never heard of Malcolm X before I heard a rapper talking about him. In fact, I thought Malcolm X was like a DJ or something. I didn't know, you know. So yeah, so it's the what the record labels have done and what they have changed what they have changed it into is it's unfortunate, but I feel like what it does, I feel like it creates a challenge for us to find conscious music. We're not going to find it on the radio. We're not going to find it on the mainstream, but it's
Definitely not. Yeah.
out there.
Mm.
But it's definitely out there.
This is
Like
why I love streaming. I know it doesn't help them make money the way the physical albums and the CDs used to do
mhm.
and the merch, but at least gives you access to your audience in a way
Yeah.
that cuts out A&R people who maybe, I'm just trying to make sure that the prisons are going to be filled. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
I
Um,
do.
yeah.
Well,
Renee, mhm.
one thing that I just wanted to add, and then Khaled had a question. Um, I think Danian, what you had spoken to just about like, um, you won't find what we're looking for like in the mainstream. I
Right.
think to me, it speaks to the way that like they have tried to take hip hop from us as a cultural practice. And what I mean
Mm.
by that is they have tried to take it away from us as something that we do,
Yes.
Like you don't have to be a rapper, you don't have to be like pulling in millions of listeners
Mhm.
on Spotify to practice hip hop, you can hammer out a beat on your desk, do a little freestyle while you're in the car, all
Yeah.
of that is an important part of this cultural practice and the way that it is not only like
Yes.
passed down, but that's when it is in its most useful to us and its most
Mhm.
powerful. But
Yes.
they have tried to they conflate it with
Mhm.
the bells and whistles.
Right.
They conflate it with you got to be going to the studio, you got to be releasing music, you got to
Mhm.
be making these numbers and making these sales and all of
Mhm.
that, to me is divorced from what this art form really is for us. But I'll
Yeah.
pass it on to Khaled.
Hi, Sheree. Right. Hi, Sheree. I just wanted to know. I don't want to take you off track, but the last thing you said, who was the person that captured 110 slaves or 110 black people?
Oh, it was the MEA Her family, I think. And the
Mayer family.
person, I think it was William Foster was the captain of the ship, I believe. But yeah, if you have access to Netflix, you can see the documentary called The Descendants
Mm-hmm.
on there. And then I believe I saw the Clotilda. I might have saw it on National Geographic, but it's also available as well. But it's a interesting documentary. I was tripped out because I believe Questlove had been on Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr.'s
Mm-hmm.
Finding Your Roots show.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they helped him track his family, the genealogical records, the paper records of the family. And they were able to find a photograph of one of his great grandfathers. And when Dr. Gates pulled out that photograph and showed it to Questlove, I had tears in my eyes. They sprung to my eyes because he is the spitting image
Yes.
of man. I kid you not. The spitting image of him. And it was just like, oh my, like, wow, that's so amazing. The human biology is so interesting because we inherit certain from our families, and I just did some more. I had done the African ancestry research back in the early 2000s when it first came out of the African Burial Ground project. And that was from HBCU, Howard University, Dr. Michael Blakely, et cetera, et cetera. And so then I decided to do another one with another company just to get a little bit more information and to see how it compared with the genealogical research that I had done and my family had done on paper. And I find out that on both sides of my family, I have a significant amount of what would be present day Nigerian DNA, which was quite interesting. And then, of course, Benin and Togo, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Angola, Namibia, Eastern Western Bantu, and so on. Like 90% of these Senegal, Mali, and Sierra Leone. So all these different things. So I'm like, wow. And then about 10% of some weird European stuff. And so I'm just like, who knows the journeys that we've made, right? The journeys, right? But the interferences, going across the ocean and snatching up other people that don't want to be with you, right? Who are unwilling and uninterested in traveling with you, is fascinating. But also just what's passed down to us as well. So Questlove, found some of his roots. They go to Alabama, right? To the place where Zora Neale Hurston actually interviewed one of his relatives, Cujo Lewis, right? And that family's history, still alive and well in Africa to this day, right? But he's walking around with one of his great grands faces, right? Like literally the same hair, right? It was the same hair. It can't be. And all the choices that brothers have today of how they can wear their hair, right? For him to be walking with that ancestor, that was just interesting. So yeah, but yeah,
reincarnated. Yeah. Is there were there any more thoughts that anybody wanted to share on Will the Circle Be Unbroken before we close out for today?
Tyler, you all right?
He's just stretching his neck.
Oh, okay.
Well, if that's all we've got, all I got to say is thank you, everybody, for another deep and wide-reaching conversation and exploration of Henry Dumas.
This is cool. Thanks.
We'll be coming back on. Let me pull it up real quick, just so I can be extra sure with these words that I say. So we'll be coming back. Nope, that ain't it.
December 27th.
Yes, December 27th. I'm trying to pull up the stories that we'll be hitting.
Ah, right there. Oh, I also want to say, if you want to know more about Henry Dumas, please look up the wonderful biography by Jeffrey B. Leake. It's called Visible Man, The Life of Henry Dumas.
Mm-hmm.
That's the cover. Very good volume. And we're going to read The Distributors,
Mhm.
The Metagenesis of Sun Ra, and Riot or Revolt.
Yes. Thank you so much for rescuing me, Sheree. Yeah.
And it'll be
Oh,
in the middle of Kwanzaa, right?
yeah, yes, yeah. And one thing that I did want to say about that, it'll be the second day of Kwanzaa, Kuja Chagalia, which is all about self-determination. And I think that Riot or Revolt and the metagenesis of Sun Ra are two very, very appropriate stories when we're talking about self-determination. Riot or Revolt is about, the civil rights movement and the struggle of our, people to define ourselves on our own terms and the vicious and violent repression that those efforts face. And the metagenesis of Sun Ra is a sort of mythologized story of the real person who was Sun Ra and his journey of creating himself in a lot of ways, and the struggles that he went through to do that. And so yeah, very excited to get into those on the 27th. um yeah, Sheree's got it up on
If
screen.
you have access to Spotify, you can hear a wonderful conversation between Sun Ra, who was, of course, the founder of the orchestra, Sun Ra Orchestra, and Henry Dumas. It's called The Ankh and the Ark. Sun Ra and Henry Dumas
Ooh.
conversation. This came out in 19. This conversation took place in 1966 in Slug Saloon in New York City, and you can hear it. It's a 24-minute conversation on Spotify.
I'm adding that to my I'm adding that to my
Cool.
library right
All
now.
right. Of course, the Sun Ra Orchestra is led today by Marshall Allen, the great Marshall Allen. Oh, we can't hear you.
Oh, I wasn't saying anything.
Oh, Mrs. Fair.
Oh, Mrs. Fair, we can't hear you. You're not muted, so I'm not sure what the issue is. Are you connected to a speaker or headphones or anything?
Can't hear you. Can you say something? Mrs. Fair?
Maybe she's trying to put it in the chat.
Okay. Oh, now I hear.
Oh, there it is.
Oh man, I was working
good.
so hard. That mute button would not cooperate. It would not cooperate. Well, I've enjoyed all the history lessons. Some I already knew, some you expanded my knowledge of. It was wonderful. And I love things written in the vernacular of the South. And when I say that, the South has lots of different vernaculars. But the Zornell Hurston, I have her book that they just finally got released because they kept saying that the English wasn't right. And it's the one about Joe. Is that
Barracoon.
Oh yeah, Barracoon.
Yes.
Yeah, because she refused to put it in standard English, right?
Right.
Love it.
Yeah.
And it finally got printed. And I was down south somewhere doing something. And when I saw it, I said, I had to have the book. And I love reading it. It is just, you have to know phonics. No. The book, it helps you to know phonics. If you don't know phonics, you need to read Barracoon. And it'll help you with your phonics.
The thing that I love about it too is that because she wrote it in like some close to his dialect of how he spoke, the emotion was so clear to me. I could hear it, like when she said his name, his actual name. And he became so moved that he wept. All of that is it's captured in such an amazing way because she made that choice, right?
Yeah.
Had she used standardized English, it would have been dead. It would have been a dead conversation.
Flat.
Yeah,
It would have just
very
been flat.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah. Later, Dad. Later, Mello. Well, yeah. Thanks everybody again for joining us here in conversation today. Thank you to everybody who tapped into the live stream or is watching this in the future. Uh, as always, if you are interested in supporting the work of the Kepler Institute, if you're interested in making sure that we can have more deep and fantastic conversations like this, visit us at donate.kepler.org and leave us something nice. Right now, right now we're in the midst of our annual fundraising campaign that we run at the end of every year. Our campaign focus for this year is all of our youth-centered work. So, especially if you're a person who cares a lot about young people, who cares a lot about making sure that there are organizations and spaces that are helping to develop young people and to support them and cultivate them.
And the old saying,
Donate.kepler.org. That's the place
and
you need to go.
and I'd like to interject. The old saying goes, "You do well to build a child rather than repair an adult."
Mm.
So I just wanted to interject that as you were talking
Preach.
about
Yeah.
the the focus.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me get off
Thank you,
this
Mrs.
phone.
Fair. And
My high school guidance counselor calling me, so let me see what's the
oh,
good news. All
yeah,
right.
that's important. at
All
at
right.
8 p.m., you better take that call.
I know, right? Bye
All
bye.
right. Thank you,
Goodbye, everyone.
Sheree. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one, y'all.
Take care. I look forward to the next one.
Thank you, Danian. Hope to see you there.
Yeah, I'll be there. Peace.
Wonderful. I can't until, yeah, there we go. Great. And is the live stream off? Because until the live stream off.